I'm John McQuay, and this is Mail Call Mondays, show that answers your questions about precision rifle equipment and gear. Today, we've got a couple of questions for you guys. First of all, what do you think about the length of the episodes? Are they running too long? I know the last couple have been starting to push close to an hour. One of the few complaints we've had about the show is that it's running a little bit too long. One gentleman complained that he can't even get to a bathroom break because we don't run any commercials during the episode. So if it's too long, let us know. We'll try to cut it back. We're trying to get through everybody's questions, but as we go on, I realize that's just not going to be possible. We're going to have to get to the point where we just weed out and go with the best questions. We're going to go ahead and jump right into it. Our first question is off of YouTube. Ragam asks, John, what's your preferred barrel length for a long-range target hunting non-F-class rifle? Well, for a 308 or a 223, I think the optimal barrel length is going to be about 20 inches. Got a 20-inch AR-10 sitting here. Now, a 20-inch barrel on a 308 is going to get you pretty much as much velocity as you can pull out of factory ammunition. Now, when you're hand loading, you may be able to pull a little bit more velocity out of a 26-inch barrel, but basically if you're shooting something like 168 grain hand load, or 168 grain match ammunition, they're going to run out of gas at about the same distance no matter if you're shooting a 20 or a 26-inch barrel. 20 inches, it splits the difference between handling and velocity. Once you go beyond 20 inches, there's an incremental increase in velocity, but that's really the point of diminishing returns. A lot of guys, the short barrels have gotten in vogue here lately, and they're shooting 18 and 16-inch barrels. I think if you're still going to run a 1,000-yard rifle, if you're still going to try to get out to 1,000 yards, then a 20-inch barrel is about the short end of where you want to be. You can do it with an 18, but you're going to do it better with a 20. Now, with a 223, 20 inches is really what that system is optimized for, and you're going to be able to pull as much as you can out of the small case capacity of the 223. I don't see a whole lot of benefit in going to a 24-inch barrel on a 223 unless you're shooting iron sights and you need that extended sight radius. If you need the extended distance for iron sights, go with a longer barrel. If you're going for a field gun and you're shooting tactical competitions, which is obviously what we're more oriented towards, then I think 20-inch on a 308 is going to be sufficient. Now, when you start getting into some of the other calibers, 243, 6 millimeters, 6.5 millimeters in there, then the cartridge is going to tell you what kind of barrel length you need. You may need a little bit longer to get a little bit more powder burn out of it. You may be able to tolerate a little bit shorter barrel, but it's going to be cartridge dependent. Again, when you're hand loading, all bets are off because your powder burn rate is going to decide if you can use a longer barrel or not. I've found that with Varget and with Reloader 15, a 20-inch barrel is fine for 1,000-yard shooting with 168 grain, 175 grain, even up to 178 grain bullets. I've done some work with 208 grain AMAXs and Reloader 17. You may benefit from a little bit longer barrel when you're packing that much powder into a case and you're launching that heavy a bullet. Smokin' Ram 07 off of YouTube asks, Hey John, can you talk about your load development highlights? I use OCW, then ladder testing at distance. My goal is both temperature forgiveness as well as grouping at distance. What's your simplified approach and your basic load evolution? Thanks for the excellent Q&A. Well, Smokin', you're welcome. My basic load development is a ladder test at 200 to 300 yards. Now, what a ladder test is you load cartridges at an incremental increase in powder charge weight. I like to use 0.3 grains for 308s. And what I'll do is I will look through quick load. I'll pull up the charge that I'm looking at, and I'll load it into quick load with the bullet, the powder type, and the case capacity I'm dealing with. And then I can go down, and quick load will give me a broad idea of the velocities for each of the charges for the barrel length that I'm working with. Now once I look through quick load, I have an idea of the performance that I'm trying to get at long range, an idea of the kind of speed that I'm trying to get. So I will center my charge weights around that speed. Now I may run up from, if it's a new powder combination, a new bullet combination that I'm not used to working with, then I'll run check charges all the way from the starting charge weight that's recommended by the powder manufacturer in half grain or even 1 grain increments all the way up to the window that I'm working with. And that's just a safety thing to make sure that I don't blow the gun up. Different rifles, different barrels, and different chamber designs will tolerate different powder charges in a different way. Some will be more sensitive, some will be less sensitive. So you always want to work up from a starting load to check when you're working with a new powder combination. So I'll get an idea of the velocity that I'm trying to target. I'll start about 10% lower than that, and I'll work up in 0.3 grain increments until I get probably about to max load on, or max charge weight on that load. I'll then take them out to the range. I'll set my target out at a minimum of 200 yards. I'll use my check loads starting from the minimum to get zeroed up on the target and make sure I'm getting good impacts on it. Then I'll switch to a clean target, because the first ones I'm just looking for pressure signs. And then I'll fire my ladder test on a clean target. Now all I'm looking for in the ladder test, I'm marking where each charge weight impacts on the ladder. I'm looking to see where the impacts suddenly group together. You'll have a couple of charges that are next to each other that will group together. You mark those, and that's what's called an accuracy node. You then fire the rest of your charges, and you may see a couple of accuracy nodes. When I'm working up, I'll generally see a low velocity node and I'll see a high velocity node. Now, a lot of people that shoot bench rest or shoot close range target shooting, they will choose whichever is the best accuracy node. If there is a drastic difference between the two accuracy nodes, then I'll choose the most accurate one. If there is not a drastic difference between the two, then I'll pick the higher velocity one, as long as we don't see any kind of pressure signs. That's simply because when shooting long range, if I get a wonderful group shooting a 175 grain bullet at 2400 foot per second, that's great for the short range game, but when I get out there, that bullet's going to be moving too slow. It's not going to take advantage of the ballistic coefficient of the round. It's not going to cheat the wind, and it's going to take a whole lot of elevation to get it on target. So I'll pick the slightly faster node so that we get out there a little bit faster and we have a little bit less wind drift. Now, once I've isolated my accuracy node, if I have 3 shots that group together, I'll choose the one that's right in the middle. I'll then go back and I may break it down to 0.1 grain charge increments and fire the ladder test again with 0.1 grains and see if I can isolate that even better. Once I have the charge weight, that's pretty much what I run with. I don't fine-tune overall length because I load to magazine length. Since I do tactical matches, single shots are really not there for me. I have to be able to have a repeater. So if the cartridge doesn't fit in the magazine, it's useless to me. So I don't mess with seating depth. I just run it at magazine length. That's pretty much all there is to it. On YouTube, Tactical Wannabe asks, "Hi John, I have a Macmillan A5 stock on its way for my Remington 700. I also have a Badger Ordnance trigger guard and removable magazine. Can you tell me, would you pillar bed and glass bed this setup or just pillar bed it? Also, can you recommend any gunsmiths to do this? Thanks for all the videos, they're great." Well, what Tactical Wannabe is talking about is glass bedding versus pillar bedding. Pillar bedding is when the gunsmith will take these little aluminum pillars, which are nothing more than a piece of tubing with some grooves cut on the outside of them, and they will embed them in a rifle stock right here where the action screws go through. Now, This is a Macmillan HTG, or Macmillan A1. It's the stock that came on the Marine Corps M40A1 sniper rifles. This one right here is an actual return stock. It came off a sniper rifle. This one is only glass bedded. That's the way the Marine Corps did them. They didn't put any pillars in. They're just holes that run through there, and then fiberglass bedding, epoxy bedding takes up the space between the stock and the bottom of the action. Now when you take up that space with the bedding, it relieves the stress across the action. It allows the action to be fully supported and not have any points where it's bending or warping when you torque it down into the stock. Now what pillars do is the pillars go in the stock, and when you torque the action down, you're torquing the floor plate, the aluminum on the bottom, or the steel bottom metal, depending on what you're using, torques it directly against the bottom of the action. This removes any possibility of crushing the stock or any added flex between the stock, because fiberglass is not quite as rigid as aluminum. If you have the choice, I would go with the aluminum pillars and regular epoxy bedding. I would not go with just pillars, because the epoxy bedding underneath the action completes the system. But whenever possible, use the pillars. It shouldn't be that much of an added cost when you have it done. As far as gunsmiths to do the job, there are quite a few out there. GA Precision, American Precision Arms, there are tons of them. What I will say is check the references. There's a pretty large tactical shooting community going on. If you post up on one of the boards on Sniper's Hide or AR15.com, somebody's going to answer up and tell you a smith near you that can do the work. When in doubt, you can send it to GA Precision and they'll take care of you. Pyro Geeks on YouTube asks, I'm not sure if you do much AR related items, but what do you prefer, DI or piston? Thanks. The gas piston or direct impingement debate is going to be a manufacturer specific kind of thing. I can't come down and tell you that all direct impingement guns are going to be good to go, because we know that there are some ARs out there that are the basic direct impingement system that are crap. I can't tell you that all gas piston ARs are good to go, because we know that some manufacturers have had problems with carrier tilt. They've had problems with the systems failing, with keys shearing off, and all kinds of other fun stuff. So you need to look at which manufacturer you're interested in, and then run down reviews on that particular rifle and talk to people that have actually used them. Beware of the keyboard commando that takes his rifle out and fires 5 rounds, then cleans it and puts it back in the safe until next year. They'll tell you that their particular rifle is the greatest one in the world. Whereas if you have a guy that's actually taken his rifle to a couple of carbine classes and run several thousand rounds through it, he may have a little bit better idea of if it's going to be a reliable system or not. So, as with anything, make sure you weigh the source that you're getting the information from. That's about as specific as I can be on the gas piston or DI debate. I don't really have a specific preference for either one. I'll use what works. I've used direct impingement M16s for quite some time. My current duty rifle is just a simple direct impingement suppressed M4. It gets filthy dirty, but it still runs, and it's been 100% reliable for me here lately. So check with the manufacturer, check with the specific model, and seek out users of them to find out how the individual rifle works. On Sniper's Hide, SNP81076 asks, what are the pros and cons of a chassis system over a composite stock? Well, the first benefit is usually that chassis systems include some type of magazine system. They're ready to roll with that. It's included in the base price. With a composite stock, that's generally not included, so you'll have to add that afterwards at an additional manufacturing cost or an additional gunsmithing cost. Chassis systems are also usually fully adjustable for length of pull, comb height. Some of them are folding. You don't generally get folding with composite stocks, although Manners has now released their folding stock system. Manners also has a mini chassis that includes a magazine system built into it. So if you should choose to have those features, then a Manners stock might be something to look at. Generally, chassis systems are drop-ins with no bedding required. You don't have to get any epoxy bedding in there to take up that space. They generally have either U-shaped or V-shaped bedding block systems to where you put your action in, you bolt it in, and you go. This can be a benefit if you're the kind of guy that likes to switch things around, because if you get a new action or buy something different or buy a new whole rifle that you want to put that chassis system on, it's a simple matter of removing the action screws, bolting the new receiver in, and you're good to go. Other than that, there is such a vast number of composite stocks out there and such a vast number of chassis systems out there, we can't get any more specific without individual this versus that. As I said, Manners has come out with their mini chassis system, which gives you a bolt-in bedding block and a removable magazine system. They've also come out with their folding stock system, so you can have a traditional composite stock that has all the benefits of a chassis system. Manners also allows you to have an adjustable cheek piece, and they have a length of pull spacer system. So if you want the benefits of a chassis but you want the feel of a conventional stock, that may be a way to go. Otherwise, if you want a fully adjustable system with a magazine system included, then there are plenty of chassis out there that fit the bill. DCR on Sniper's Hide asks, from a practical tactical point of view, what are your thoughts on using a quick cuff type sling versus a rapid adjust sling like the VTAC for field work and or competition use? Well, the VTAC and the quick cuff slings really do two totally different things. VTAC slings, 2-point and 1-point type slings, they're really designed for carbines and CQB type weapons, and they're designed to hold them in place on your body if you need to go hands-free or if you need to draw a secondary weapon system. With slings such as the quick cuff, the tab, or the sling that I have here, they're really designed to support a precision rifle in shooting. They're not so much for control of the weapon when you want to go hands-free. A lot of guys use them as carry straps or shoulder straps, but their main purpose is to be able to sling up with the weapon and better support it. The sling actually does most of the work. The hand is just there to control where the foreend's pointed. This is just with the hasty sling. Most of the slings that you're talking about, the quick cuffs or the tabs, they generally have a loop in them that allows you to run it as a loop sling as well. We hope to get into a sling specific episode a little bit later on. There are a lot of things you can do with the slings. A lot of shooters misunderstand how to use a sling properly. So we hope to get into that just a little bit later. But on a precision rifle, I definitely recommend slings such as the tab slings or the tactical intervention slings. They will really increase your shooting when you have to go unsupported. For a CQB rifle, the VTAC slings work great, but we're mainly dealing with the precision rifles here, and I think if you put a VTAC sling on a precision rifle, especially a bolt gun, you're really not going to get the most out of what a sling can give you. Slayer2C asks, I only have access to a 100-yard range at this time. What drills do you recommend to strengthen my shooting? I've been using the 3/4-inch dot drill and have had very success. Just wanted to see what you would recommend to us. Well, Slayer, having a 100-yard range is a little bit of an issue for long-range shooting because you're not going to learn to call the wind. But you can still do quite a few drills to fine-tune your application of the fundamentals. Once you get your dot drills down, you can add time limits to it, add some speed. That'll generally add stress. Other options is you can add physical stress. You can run, do push-ups, jumping jacks, anything that'll elevate your heart and respiration before you drop down behind the rifle. Very frequently, guys that are excellent shots when they have all the time in the world seem to have problems when you start raising that stress level in the body. Part of the ability of being a great match shooter is the ability to take that physical stress and then very quickly bring your pulse and breathing down and control your shots. Now, another thing you can do is you can practice unsupported shooting. either just using a sling or using your natural body support. Learning to use that natural relaxation, the muscular relaxation, bone support, and getting your natural point of aim will greatly help you in unsupported shooting. Once you get that stuff dialed in, all of that also rolls back in to your prone supported shooting. You still have to have the muscular relaxation, the natural point of aim. So that stuff will reinforce everything else. You can do barricade drills at 100 yards. If a lot of the barricade drills that I've run are run at extended ranges, but doing a barricade drill at 100 yards and then reducing the size of your targets will increase the difficulty level and require you to really make sure that you've got a solid position before you rip that shot off. So those are some ideas on things that you can toss into your training so that even at 100 yards, you can prepare yourself for longer distances or for match shooting. Now, another benefit, if you're really limited to 100 yards, will be look into a 22 trainer. 22s, when you start trying to really fine-tune that accuracy at 100 yards, the wind is going to come into play. It's still a minor factor, but if you're trying to shoot, dimes at 100 yards with a 22, then you're going to need to make sure you're making accurate wind calls. On AR-15, TRW Motorsports asks, just speaking towards traditional stocks here, no chassis systems, what advantages does a Manners or Macmillan offer that, say, a Bell & Carlson does not? Is there a structural rigidity difference, better action, support, or weight? Well, really, when you get into chassis systems like the Manners or Macmillan, what you're paying for is you're paying for the extra quality of materials, and you're paying for a little bit better construction. Manners and Macmillan both have quite a bit more substantial construction than a Bell & Carlson or an H&S Precision. The H&S Precision and the Bell & Carlson are solid stocks at their price point, but when you compare them to a Manners or Macmillan, you start to see in the external finishing and in the internal materials used the quality difference. There's not anything specifically that I can point at and say this is where your money's going. It's the overall package, it's the care that it's constructed with, and when you're talking about a Macmillan or Manners, also generally you have quite a few more options on the stock. With both Manners and Macmillan, you have an option on the colors, the finishes. You have options on different inlets that may not be available with some of the other manufacturers. You also get a little bit added strength. Now, I haven't taken a Bell & Carlson stock to destruction yet. I put mine through some pretty harsh conditions, but I haven't driven a truck over them. Manners is very fond of demonstrating the strength of their composite stocks. We've all seen the truck parked on the Manners stock. They have one at SHOT a couple years back, actually 2 years ago, that they were inviting people to jump on and bounce on. And the stock is fairly sturdy. They did a really good job in manufacturing those stocks to a high level of quality and a high level of strength. So too the Macmillan. Macmillan stocks I've seen put through hell. We've seen them drop down the side of mountains, fallen on, slammed in the hatches of Amtraks. They have really been beaten to hell, and I have never seen a Macmillan stock break. I'm sure at some point in time, somewhere they've broken, but they're incredibly durable stocks. So if I were to point to any one feature, I would say that the strength is going to be greater in a Manners and Macmillan than a Bell & Carlson or an H&S Precision. So it's really going to come down to what you need and what you're going to do with it. The average shooter is never going to need the strength that those stocks offer. However, there's a lot to be said for the peace of mind of knowing it is there when you spend your money on it.
TRW's second question is, when choosing a factory load, say in 308, do you have different weights for short range and then switch to a heavier load for 500 plus? If so, do you just keep notes on the POI change and apply that dope when switching to the heavier load? Basically, no, I don't. I set up one load for the rifle and I will shoot that one load for the match, no matter if I'm shooting at 100 yards or 1,000 yards. The load is set up for best performance at long range, and that load usually gives me adequate performance at 100 so that I don't have to switch between the two. Remember, when we're shooting tactical rifles, we're not looking for bench rest accuracy, so I don't have to worry about any of the nonsense of switching to a different style of bullet for close range versus long range. Now, one of the situations that I did run into is one of the rifles that I was using for work and using for play, I had to shoot two different loads, one load at work and one load at home. The duty ammunition printed a slightly different point of impact than my match ammunition. And it was distinct enough that I had to carry two different zeros, one for the duty load and one for the match load. Now it was very simple because the turrets remained zeroed for the duty load. I simply shot the match load with the duty load 0 on the rifle and then noted what my correction on my turrets would be to get me zeroed for the match load. You write that down in your logbook, and it's just as simple as when you show up on match day, dial in the correction. Now, when I'd actually go away for a distance match, then I'd re-zero the rifle right before I left town in order to get me dialed on for my match load. And when I come back, I would immediately re-zero the rifle for my duty load. That way it was set up and ready to go. I wouldn't mess with doing that unless you absolutely have to. I most certainly wouldn't shoot two different loads at the same match on one gun. There really is not a whole lot of benefit to doing that. The accuracy in these weapon systems is such now that at close range, you're still going to get great performance with a long range load. TRW's final question is, I think most of us have seen the SH low light video on shooting a gas gun versus a bolt gun. Can you share some insights on the subject? Do you think gas guns really are more sensitive to shooter inputs? Well, TRW, I think gas guns really are more sensitive to shooter input. I think it basically comes down to two factors. The first being lock time. When you press the trigger on a bolt gun, the firing pin is released. It comes forward, strikes the primer, initiates the round. The round goes down the barrel, bullet exits, and you're done. In a gas gun, when you press the trigger, it releases the hammer. On AR type systems, the hammer swings through an arc. It then has to strike a firing pin. The firing pin then has to go forward, hit the primer, initiating the round, sending the bullet down the barrel. When the hammer swings through an arc, it has some inertia, it has mass, it may cause the system to move just a little bit. Now, it doesn't really cause much to move sights a quarter inch on a target 100 yards away. So I believe that may have a little bit to do with the greater requirement of shooter control on the system. I've noticed through my own experience that gas guns respond to a heavier touch than bolt guns do. I just use dead weight basically to control the bolt gun. Whereas on the gas gun, I have to take a more active role and tighten my grip up just a little bit. I'm not crushing it, but I'm holding it just a little bit more firmly than I do on a bolt gun. I notice that gives me better results when going back and forth between the bolt gun and the gas gun on the same day, same firing line, and same ammunition. Now, I think the second thing that may affect some shooters is when you're firing a gas gun, there are three distinct recoil impulses. There's the initial recoil impulse when you fire the round. There's a secondary recoil impulse when the bolt carrier slams to the back of its travel. There's a third recoil impulse when the bolt carrier moves forward, strips around, and then slams back into battery. So you get two rearward punches and one forward punch every time you pull the trigger. Now, this all occurs after the bullet has left the bore, so obviously that does not affect how the round impacts on the target. However, I believe that can affect the shooter's mindset when he's driving the gun. He knows what's about to happen when he presses the trigger, and I think it can cause him to break his follow-through a little bit sooner than he should. Follow-through is critical on any precision weapon system. So if you're coming out of your bubble before things have stopped moving, then you can keep pressing that earlier and earlier until you're coming out of your bubble before the bullet's left the bore. I think those are the two key factors. Now, a lot of this is speculation on my part. I'm not bashful to tell you that because I don't have the resources right now to rig up high-speed cameras and watch exactly what's occurring between the rifle systems. I'm basing my opinion, and that's really all this is, my opinion, off of my experience shooting gas guns and bolt guns. I know that for me to get the most out of a gas gun, it requires a heavier touch than it does on a bolt gun. So give it a try. If you're having problems shooting a gas gun, try tightening down a little bit on it, pulling it rearward a little bit more into the pocket of the shoulder and then driving it into the bipod and really loading that bipod a little bit more on the gas gun. It's taken a little bit of experimentation for me to figure out what I need to do to get the most out of these rifles. They are less forgiving than bolt guns, but that just makes them a little bit more fun to shoot. Timothy Moore on Facebook writes, "Great second video. I also sport the same cash-saving haircut. Talking about my lovely do here that I cut at home. My question is, what are your options on the Vortex Viper PST, specifically the 6-24x50 FFP? Is there the possibility of a full review in the future? Also, just want to say thanks for the great website. Your Budget Precision Build series is great and has been the basis for my build. Keep up the good work, and Semper Fi. Well, Timothy, Semper Fi to you too. I'm glad you've gotten some use out of the Budget Precision video. We've been doing that series basically so guys can follow along and build their own rigs and get into the precision rifle world. On the Vortex Viper PST, we've actually been trying to get one to review since they were released. Vortex is telling us that they are very short on supply. We hope to get one soon, and as soon as we do, we'll get the review and get it up on the website. On email, Gene Blaylock asks, I'm in the market for a new bolt gun, looking at the Remington 700 AAC SD or the Savage Model 10 Precision Carbine. Looking for a quality gun that doesn't need a lot of work to be accurate. Well, both those rifles are going to be fairly accurate out of the box. Both of them are entry-level platforms. The difference between the Remington and the Savage is going to come down to a lot of personal preference. I highly suggest that you at least go to a gun store and fondle the two rifles before you decide on which one you want. They both send a .308 round downrange, but they do so with a little bit different style. The Remington 700, I prefer the action on the Remingtons just because once they get some wear on them, they smooth out very nicely. They feel very smooth and they lock down very tight. The Savage, I believe because of the floating bolt or the floating bolt head design on it, there's a little bit more play in the actions. It's the feel of lifting and closing the bolt on the Savage is a little bit different. And then finally, the Savage has an AccuTrigger on it. It's got that little blade in the front of the trigger that serves as secondary safety. Now, I have two AccuTrigger equipped rifles in the safe here. I shoot them. I'm not a great big huge fan of the way it feels versus standard trigger. It still works great. It still gets the job done. Just personally for me, I like a solid trigger face. So it is definitely a lot of personal opinion. You need to get behind them, you need to play with them, you need to shoot them. They both can be extremely accurate systems. They're both production rifles though, so you get highs and you get lows. You may get one that shoots the lights out, you may get one that shoots just adequately. That's the risk you run with entry-level factory rifles, but either one I think is going to suit your needs. So get out there and play with them and see which one you like better. If you try to ask on the internet, Remington versus Savage is always a hot topic, and you'll get battles back and forth between Remington owners and Savage owners. I own both Remington and Savage, so in my opinion, you need to try them and figure out for yourself. Matt from email asks, how do you compensate for shooting one elevation to another? One of the ranges I shoot at has 50, 100, and 200 meter targets stacked in the shooter's line of sight, behind and elevated above each other. From the prone shooter to 200 meters, there's probably a 10-foot elevation increase. Thanks. Well, Matt, honestly, shooting a .308 at 200 meters, unless you are at a great incline, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference. At a 20-degree incline, you're only going to impact about 7/10 of an inch off of what your flat line dope would be. So at 200, I wouldn't say worry about it too much. Go ahead and shoot it. Note your variation in dope in your logbook for that range, and then drive on. We're going to do an episode on angle shooting a little bit later because as you get out to extended ranges or increased angles, it does start to make quite a bit of difference. The differences at 500 and out and at 45 degrees are quite profound. So we'll get into that a little bit later. It's a little bit too much to get into on the Q&A. Okay guys, that's it for this episode. As always, thank you for your questions. Please make sure you keep sending them in. We can't do the show without questions, so it is totally dependent on you. Your questions make the show. You can either send us your questions in the comments section below or on Facebook or Twitter. Again, another week with no Twitter comments. Twitter is not popular with you guys. If you like the video, click the like button below. It increases our standings in the search results and lets us keep doing what we're doing. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. Subscribing doesn't cost you anything at all, and YouTube will let you know when we release a new video. We don't do the actual review videos on any kind of regular schedule, so that'll help you out. You'll know as soon as we post a new review video. It looks like we may actually get this episode of Mail Call Mondays out on Monday, so keep your fingers crossed and hope we're able to do that. Thank you guys, and until next week, send us your questions.